Hey guys, Pastor Ben here with another review and reflection. Today I want to talk about a book I finished listening to with my family as we were on a car trip recently. A classic of children's literature, Winnie-the-Pooh by A. Milne. So what I'd like to do in this review, this will probably be a pretty short review because I'm assuming most of you have either read the book or you've seen the movie or you're familiar with the world of Winnie-the-Pooh in some way. It's become very, very popular over its more than 100 years history now, which is amazing to think about. So what I want to do in this review is really just give a few thoughts about the book itself, and then also a few thoughts about the audiobook version that we listened to, because it's got some great unique things. So first off, the book itself is a just delightful book to read. If you grew up reading it as a kid, or even if you're coming to it as an adult, I'm pretty sure my mom read this to me when I was a kid. We grew up with the Disney movie for sure, but I had not read it in many many years, and we didn't read it a ton. I don't think growing up. So listening to it recently, it was kind of my first chance that I could remember to kind of go back through the book itself. Although again, the characters are so ubiquitous, you see them everywhere. But it was great to read the original book again. It's divided into 10 chapters, which are really just kind of 10 stories about Winnie the Pooh and his friend Christopher Robin, and then the various friends that are there in the Hundred Acre Woods. And all of the characters, this would be kind of one of the things I would say, all of the characters are just very iconic, very memorable. Piglet and Rabbit and Kanga and Roo and Owl and Eeyore. Each of them just has a wonderful developed character. Again, sometimes in kids' books it can be kind of stock characters, and I think one of the things that I love about what Milne has done here is that with each of these characters, he's created someone that's very unique, very recognizable, and that's part of what makes them gripping and compelling. And it's kind of an odd assortment of characters, and yet they work really well together. And so each of these 10 chapters is really just telling a standalone story around these characters. Not every character is in every story, although Pooh and Christopher Robin are in every story, but it's sort of bringing different ones together and telling about their little adventures. None of it's very high stakes, nothing dramatic or scary, but just charming, sweet stories around these really well imagined, well fleshed out characters. And so for kids, you can see why it's so gripping and enchanting, because the characters are compelling, and just the idea of like this one human child, Christopher Robin, and then these friends that he has, and there's no adults in the story, right? There's no grown-ups. There aren't even other kids. So it's kind of that play world, and the way it's sort of framed even is that A. Milne is telling stories to his son Christopher, and this is in real life. A. Milne had a son named Christopher, who was Christopher Robin, that this character was made from, and it's like he's telling his son these stories of adventures that he and his stuffed animals and imaginary friends are having. And so it kind of captures that secret world that all kids love and kind of long for. And they imagine themselves as the Christopher Robin and the friends that they have. And right now, our kids are all fairly young. They can spend endless hours, literally endless hours, just playing with toys, playing with stuffed animals, creating these little worlds, setting things up. And reading Winnie the Pooh is like seeing that played out in a book, right? And so it's so great and works so well at a kid's level, and is good, just food for the imagination. When you read it as an adult, you'll notice as well that alongside all of that, Milne has a really great grasp of the English language. He's a good writer. And he wrote a lot of poetry in his life, some of it for kids in particular. We've got a couple of his books of poems that we read regularly to our girls at bedtime. And he just loves to play with language. And so you pick up on that as an adult, the way that he'll create new words, the way that he'll relate things together. There's adult humor, not in the sense that phrase is used sometimes today, a sort of inappropriate humor. I hate that. The least mature humor we sometimes talk about as adult humor. There's a paradox there that should not be. But what I mean is there's more sophisticated humor that's going on that kids aren't going to pick up on, the plays on words, or the way characters relate, or things like that. It kind of is like a Frog and Toad book, where you'll get these things that as an adult you read it and you kind of chuckle inside, even though the kids aren't necessarily picking up that it's funny. And Milne does that a lot as well. And again, as an adult, you look and you see the friendship and relationships that exist amongst these different characters, and it's very, very compelling book. It's a classic for a reason. It's been around for more than 100 years, has been well loved, published and reprinted. And the copy I have here is the print copy that we own. It has the decorations by Ernest H. Shepard, which are kind of the classic Winnie-the-Pooh drawings that many of us will have grown up with if you know these books and stories. This is a great copy of the book, but when we read it recently, we didn't read this copy. We actually listened to an audiobook. So kind of part 2 of this, I want to talk a little bit about that audiobook. We got it, there was like a free credit at some point in the past on Audible for this audio version of Winnie-the-Pooh, read by Peter Dennis, who was a British actor who was well known. He did a lot of different things, but kind of what he became most famous for was he did an audiobook version of Winnie-the-Pooh, and I think a couple other of Milne's books, some of his poetry books, some of his Winnie-the-Pooh stuff. And for a whole generation of listeners, I think especially in England, he became like the voice of Winnie-the-Pooh. And the characters and everything were just iconic to that. So I think maybe in the way that the Disney movie version of Winnie-the-Pooh kind of set the tone for Americans of like, what does Piglet sound like and what does Rabbit sound like? I think Peter Dennis kind of did that for the Brits. So this was a version read by Peter Dennis. It's about 2 hours and 46 minutes, so it's not a long book, but it's the full unabridged set of stories, and it has woven in some music, especially like at the beginning of stories, in between stories, and some sound effects as well. It's not a full audio drama, but it's somewhat dramatized, and he does a great job with the voices as well. Because I am an American, and I kind of had in my head from the movie what some of these characters sound like, Peter Dennis, he's doing his own voices. They aren't the same. But I could definitely see it, especially after we listened to, all 10 of the chapters from this book. I could definitely see why Peter Dennis's version of this, his portrayal of this, was so iconic and informative for a whole generation. It's very well done. Music is very calming. It's nice to have some of those sound effects and things, because I enjoyed listening to it on audiobook, but it was kind of a shame to not be able to get the illustrations at the same time. But I think the way that production was put together kind of filled in some of those gaps. So I'm looking forward to rereading it with my girls at some point so that we can have the pictures, because those are great in their own right. But if you're going to do an audio version, I would highly recommend the Peter Dennis version. But whether it's audiobook or whether it's in print, I think everyone, especially if you've got kids, but even if you don't, I would recommend reading Winnie-the-Pooh by A.A. Milne.